Hey there, welcome to the Posit Data Science Hangout. I'm Libby Heron, and this is a recording of our weekly community call that happens every Thursday at 12 p.m. US Eastern Time. If you are not joining us live, you miss out on the amazing chat that's going on. So find the link in the description where you can add our call to your calendar and come hang out with the most supportive, friendly, and funny data community you'll ever experience. Can't wait to see you there. So today I am super excited to introduce Tom Grace and Darren Cope from HMRC. Let's start with Tom. Tom, um, I would love it if you could introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your role, and maybe a little bit about HMRC in general.
Okay, hello. I'm Tom. HMRC, for those who are unfamiliar or from outside of the UK, is the tax office. Um, my my role is as a tech lead on the Posit platform team. So what we do is we build Posit installations. We have about 7 or 8 of those now of Workbench and Connect. We build those and we make sure that they are shaped the right way so that the data scientists across the organization can do the best work they can. The tech lead thing it's partly technical, but it's also quite heavy on the culture aspect of leadership. So it's making sure that our team is a good team to be on, and also making sure that we are approachable and find it easy to be empathetic with those who are using the platforms and systems that we build. So that's my role within the broader picture of it. I can explain a bit more about HMRC if you need. We've got some pretty big data sets jumped across quite a lot of different things.
I think that the coolest thing that you said in that whole thing was that you have a Posit platform team, which means you have a team of people dedicated to making sure that people can use the tools that you have and know how to use them, you can use them effectively. I think that that's really rare and kind of amazing because I can hear from people in the chat, I'm sure all the time that like we get tools from vendors, from suppliers, and then they kind of come to our organization and die out. Nobody knows how to use them. They're not very well supported. It really takes an internal effort to make sure that that happens. And it sounds like you all do that in a wonderful way. Well, I want to invite Darren to um, tell us a little bit about his role at HMRC or give us some extra context on HMRC. Darren, are you with us? There he is. Oh,
Can you hear me?
yes, we can hear you.
Oh my God, it works. So bad. I am on
Oh,
my phone. How thoroughly modern. All the devices failed me.
all
Can you hear
right.
me
I
okay?
can hear you
No?
now. Yes, I can. For a
Marvelous.
little bit, it was breaking up, but
Hooray.
you're good now.
Oh, hooray. Hooray. This is the wonders of working in the office. Tom has fortunately works from home and so has wonderful Wi-Fi.
Uh-oh. I think that we lost
I'm breaking
Darren.
up.
Yep, just a little bit.
Oh, no. No, I'm going to stand next to the window. Well, concentrate on Tom and we'll see how we get on.
Would you like
Okay,
me to
well,
do a quick introduction of Darren?
I was going to say that would
Okay.
be fantastic because I know that Darren is a Posit subject matter expert, which is a very unique role. I'm not sure I know any other Posit subject matter experts at other organizations. Tom, what is Darren's role on the team?
So Darren is he sits between the platform team and also our fairly new Posit adoption team. And it's his job to understand the nuts and bolts of what it is people need to do on the platform. So the platform team themselves are coming at it from the perspective of, oh, we've got some servers over here. And Darren's coming at it from the perspective of, I've got some data sets. How do I get access to those? What do I want to do with them? What kind of problems are coming down the track? How can we use this better? Are there situations where people are using legacy tooling at the moment where with a bit of support they could move across to something that's a bit more modern and easier to work with? So it's a greater focus on user need rather than the the technical aspect of it, spending a bit of time trying out, like kicking the tires on the AI functionality, playing with new tools and approaches, and just building a bit of an understanding and relationship with people from that end.
Right. One thing I heard from Darren was that when I talked to him earlier this week, he said, I just came out of a coffee and coding session for people who want to use Posit tools and have never used them before. And he had over 160 people in there, which is wild. That's as many people as we have on the Hangout call right now, right? So all those people from your organization who are interested in using different tools, who get the chance to have an empathetic person sitting there and saying, like, let me just walk you through how this works. Let me show you what this is like. And I know that a lot of the people at your organization who are interested in using these tools are coming from other things like SaaS. Do you still have like a whole lot of SaaS users inside of your org?
Yes. I mean, it's a very large organization. We've we've got a whole number of everything users. There's a fair number of SaaS users. There's, as you'd expect, shed loads of Excel users. Um, but probably pretty much any large enterprisey tool that you can think of, there's a fair few users of that. There are people who are perhaps multi-decade SaaS users who would be interested in moving across, but it's quite a learning curve for them.
It is, yeah.
Um,
I really
but
love the
yeah,
way that you all approach it with lots of empathy and kindness and stuff. And Darren also mentioned doing road shows to other teams. So like going into other teams and saying, "Hey, it seems like maybe you all would like to move to open source tool solutions. Here, let me show you what this can do." Which is, I also think, a really, really unique thing inside of the organization. Okay, well, let's pivot just a little bit so that I can backtrack slightly and ask another context building question, which is about the tools that you all use, the problems that you face, and the kinds of data that you see. So, for people who are not in a tax focused area and maybe don't have the experience of that, could you tell us a little bit about maybe an example of a type of problem you tackle, the type of data that you see in the tools you use,
so
or that your
they're
teams
a
use that
bit
you support?
yes, yeah. So yeah, I don't do any data analysis myself, but um, it's the organization covers everything from things like import and export duty. They so there are teams who are doing things like um, running analysis on bulk corporate corporate returns, or they are looking back over historical data, looking for patterns. There are teams who are modeling proposals for like for the government around, if we introduce this, what might that do? There are teams who are doing things like looking for the logo on the internet. There are teams doing loads and loads of different things, and it is a huge gulf of different. It's a huge gulf of different things. But we have, using just Posit, I think we are edging towards about 600 analysts, and they are in a huge variety of areas and also experience levels, or kind of focus areas. So there are people who are who are building tooling to use AI models to expose internal documentation better, but there are also people who are just doing kind of routine, almost like an enhanced spreadsheet type work. It's a
Right.
huge breadth of things. It's massive, the scope sideways of it. But I'm not super close to the day to day of what people are doing. They come when there is a problem shaped like I wish this machine was bigger type.
Well, that's what I would love to ask you about too. When you say Posit, like we use Posit as a tool, Posit is also this like multifaceted thing with all these different things inside of it. Do you have a lot of R users who are in RStudio or Positron? Do you have a lot of Python users who are in Positron? Um, what does that sort of composition look like for you as far as the people that you're serving?
Uh, it varies a bit between teams. I think we're about 50-50 between, or maybe slightly under 50-50. Slightly fewer R users than Python users, and the Python users are mostly between positron and VS Code, gradually going more positron. We have got some people using Jupyter still, and we try and support just whatever tools work best for people. So we try as hard as we can not to push people in a particular direction, but to make available the things that are right for their use case, and to talk to them about why a certain thing is easy or hard. In terms of things deployed to Connect, majority these days are Python. And those are, I think the future for Connect apps seems like it's quite heavy on Python, at least for the more sort of trailblazy type stuff. But we've got plenty of Shiny and plenty of R as well.
So when you say Python, is that more like Streamlit apps being launched in Connect?
Yes, yeah, that kind
Streamlit,
of,
okay.
yeah.
Very cool. So we've got Streamlit, we've got Shiny, we've got deployment on Connect, we have got a really cool split of R and Python users, which I feel like I also don't hear very often. I think that's very cool. And it leads me to an anonymous question that we have in Slido. Let me go highlight it. That we'll send it to the top. And don't forget, you can go upvote questions if you see any that you like, everybody. This question says, when people suggest new tools that they want to use, what is the most helpful information that they share? How does that process go? This says, in short, can you help teach us how to get things approved by our own teams?
When the way we tend to work, if people come and say, if I take a simple example like an extension to positron, which is pretty easy for us to do, the the main questions we'd have is, what's the licensing like? What's the support, and how actively maintained is it? Um, and is it solving a unique problem that is not solved by something else that's already available? So something like that is quite simple for us to do. The main reason we don't just blanket allow VS Code extensions is we need to make sure we keep them maintained for the foreseeable future so that we don't pull the rug on anybody. For more significant kind of technologies, say if we were introducing Connect now as
Right.
new,
Pretty big.
yeah, something big like that. The the main thing is, what does this give that what you have available now does not provide? Is this, what can you do now? Can you build an EC2 server and stick your Python app on it? Why isn't that good enough? What's it bringing that what you have available can't provide now? And the way we work, the amount of evidence increases with how complex that piece of work is. So an example where we didn't implement it was looking at the inference servers for some of the self-hosted AI models. We were experimenting with those early on before we had access to models provided by cloud providers, and playing with those, we did experiment with whether we would benefit from the inference server. There were some costs, there were some complexities, there is business approval and support type stuff, and that's quite a high bar. So the effort needs to be worth it. And I think the thing um, where there's maybe a gap sometimes is when people are asking about new things, they're seeing it in I can grab this on my laptop at home, I can make it available, and if I get bored of it in 6 months, I can get rid of it. Where for quite a few larger organizations in particular, they're looking at it and going, as soon as you put that there, we're running it for 10 years. That is going to be used by someone, and we're going to have to maintain it.
Right. Someone's going to have to keep it clean.
Yeah, it's going to have to keep working for a long time. With we do that even with the VS Code extensions. We're expecting that we will have to keep these available, and so we do make more of a hurdle to bringing them on, just because we don't want to pull things away from people later.
Right. Yes. Yeah. I think that the bigger your organization gets, the harder that process gets. And it's understandable with that kind of scale. Um, I wanted to go back to something you said about like, you know, could you just spin up an EC2 server and stick this on there and would that suffice? That reminds me that you all have some dynamic allocation happening where you are allowing people to sort of choose their own compute and giving them budgets. And I had forgotten about that. I'd love you to talk about that just a little bit so people have some context around that as well, because I think
Yeah,
it's very cool.
so yeah, that's been very popular with people. So that's a thing that we did a small scale rollout of sometime last year, and it's gradually getting more adoption now. It's kind of built on it. Well, it's built on top of the Slurm launcher inside Workbench. And what we've done is configured that in such a way that instead of having a static Slurm cluster and slotting things onto it, we launch EC2 instances as people request them. But the thing that's been very popular is in the dropdown, you have a list of instance types and it has the price per hour in dollars. And so an analyst can be given a monthly or project budget. They might choose to use that running a couple of different small instances for a couple of months, or they might choose to run a huge instance for a day. But it empowers them to make those decisions. And we've built it in such a way that we can sort of follow the org chart. So the senior management can set the overall budget, and then team leads can be delegated down to and pass that out as appropriate. And that has been incredibly popular. The initial use case was people who needed to do some particularly large processing on an occasional sort of schedule. And that sort of model is difficult to do with the way large organization budgets are set. But using knowledge of how the organization thinks about budgets, we built a thing where they can go, okay, allocate this much money. That's your pot for the year. Once it's gone, which fits the budget cycle and can be then they can use it dynamically as they need. And that's been very popular.
That's awesome. I feel like I mentioned earlier, we don't get to hear IT perspectives a lot. And I have a couple of questions that are kind of along that sort of tack. So I would love to hop over to Slido and ask some of those. Um, Natasha had asked, let's see. Natasha had asked one, and then there is also an anonymous one. Aha, there it is. Here we go. We have an anonymous question that says, how do I find time for data science training if I'm struggling to complete routine work? Oh no, it's gone. Okay, somebody press something in Slido.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I tried to
It's
put it
okay.
to the top.
It's okay. It was at the bottom and it jumped to the top. It says, how do I find time for data science training if I'm struggling to complete routine work tasks? I am IT and I run a Posit Connect platform. So this is an IT perspective, trying to keep track of business as usual, but also trying to make time for data science training. Tom, do you all inside of your sort of admin or IT focused organization train in data science yourselves and try to keep up with what your end users are doing?
We don't train formally, but as a team, we have a system of dog fooding. So if we've got so we have our own tiny Posit Connect tenancy that we use for our own purposes. And what we do is we use the tools that we manage to build internal things like dashboards. So we have things like a release dashboard so people can see changes to the platform over time. We build those things on top of Connect. We use it to do ad hoc analysis type things as we need to So we sort of bake it into our daily work, and maybe we try and budget in that it's valuable in and of itself to do things like that as part of the team culture. We make sure that we don't overcommit as a team, and so we make sure that we have enough time so it's acceptable for someone to, I don't know, for example, instead of analyzing how long it took to do some tickets in Excel where it's familiar, actually taking 10 times longer and doing it in Python or R in order to become familiar with those tools is an acceptable thing to do. There have been a few examples where there would be something that we could do very quickly, where people just use the tools they already know, smash the thing out. But we've structured the team in such a way that actually you can implicitly train. I don't know how we'd do it if it was formalized training. That might be more of a commitment, but making a bit of space in there to work like that. It's the way we try and structure the team as best we can.
I think that is a very brave answer because, oh my gosh, when I'm looking at something and I'm like, I have to get this done, and I know that I could learn something new by going the long way and using something different, I really struggle with that. I just think, oh no, I just have to get this done. I've got to do it the way that I know. So that's wonderful advice. And I think it's so difficult to actually take. Okay, so
it's difficult to do it's particularly difficult to do as individual contributor. It needs to be an intentional feature of the team and an accepted thing, I think, by everyone involved. Sorry,
yes, yeah. No, you said exactly what I was thinking. Was it must be a team culture thing. It's like, this is an okay thing to do, and we know that if you need to take an extra day to do this thing, it's okay because you're going to learn something new. I think that's wonderful. Okay, so I mentioned that I saw a question from Natasha. That was good. I'm going to send that one to the top and highlight it so that I can ask it for Natasha because she's got a little asterisk in there. She says, I noticed that when someone uses programming languages that no one else at the company uses, there can be difficulties when they leave. Either their work needs to be converted to another language, or a new person needs to be hired who can use that different language as it is. How do you minimize this issue? Do you have any sort of thoughts on this from your perspective?
I think at the organization level, it's so big that we sort of don't end up with that problem. Within the team, because we're a relatively small team, so we are there's 5 of us pretty much, well, give or take. What we would tend to do is we try and minimize it, and I think similar to when introducing a new tool, a similar approach of really justify why you need to bring it on. If it is worth bringing on that new tool, it needs to be more than just a personal preference. So we use a lot of Ansible for things. It's not something I like very much. I'm not a fan of Ansible, but still using it because it's in wide use across the team and the wider team and is unlikely to go anywhere. So at that side, try and avoid that problem. If it is worth bringing in, then try and make sure you're sharing work. So something we do within the team is similar to doing it the slow way to learn more things. We try and have people who are less experienced take on areas of the system that they haven't used much before. Again, it's a little bit slower, but we try and avoid having the issue where, yeah, this person specializes in this area. We still, as you'd expect, we still get things where someone is very familiar, and so we would lean on them if something especially unusual happens, but we will try and spread work around so that people do pick up that language that only one person uses. And even if it is slower, it tends to be valuable because I think every language has its own quirks and good sides, bad sides. And I think for anyone who writes code, learning to write another language makes you better at the one you knew before, as well as teaching you about the other one. So yeah, if you mostly write R, spending a few weeks being annoyed at Python or vice versa, you see new patterns, new approaches, and you will learn something from it. It's not just a time sink.
Yes, and I wanted to highlight a couple of really great things in the chat, because they sort of touch on this and are great examples of what other people do. So Megan Harris says, we do rotations on projects in my department, so everyone has touched it at least one time, and it's been a really great way to learn. I love that. And then Joseph said, one mitigation approach we try is to keep a skills matrix for each team, which drives individual development plans as well to work on backups when a new tool is introduced. We make that part of the skills assessment / development. Amazing. And yes, Rachel had said, Darren, if you are able to unmute and we want to test your sound and you have things to add on this, absolutely feel free to unmute if you're able. I'm so sorry that your connection has been crummy today. Natasha, thank you so much for asking that fantastic question. And Rachel saw one in the chat that was great as well, or actually in Slido. Rachel, would you like to hop in and ask that one?
Yeah, it was actually my question, but I accidentally put anonymous in Slido.
That's okay. People do that all the time. I see replies that are like, oops, this was me.
But I was just trying to put myself in the mindset of different financial use cases. And I was wondering if your team is integrating Posit and Excel. I remember like you used to hear so many Excel questions, and I was wondering, is this still really relevant for people? Like, do stakeholders still want the reports to be in Excel?
That's not hugely my area, in fairness. So we're that sits more with our user base. But from what I've seen for the kind of particularly for the things consumed by the senior stakeholders, they're very happy to have things presented as a Connect app rather than something that they would then download. I think that seems to be where they're quite happy with it. I think since a lot of the Excel type stuff is a link anyway, because it sits in SharePoint, I think people are generally happier with here, have this link. They don't really care if it's Excel or Posit. But as I say, it's not really my bit. I don't do huge amounts with the actual, like the bones of the applications our users develop.
Well, this is a great question for the chat then, because in my experience, Excel and Word is where everything ends up, and it's where every output needs to be. Natasha says that, yep, stakeholders do in her organization. Nikita says Excel is where all data ends up. We have a lot of, Natasha says they're suspicious of R, or they can't review it. And that's what I see a lot, is that, oh, well, we want to see it and play with it. So there always needs to be a download button. There always needs to be a way to get that so that I can touch it and I can write on it and do things with it. I don't know if that will ever go away. Zach says all roads lead to Excel. Yes, for sure. Okay. I would love to hop back over to Slido. And there was a question from Natasha Natasha, I think we covered it. So I'm going to mark it as answered. It was like what kind of tools do you use? Stuff like that. I see you nodding. Okay, great. Good. Oh, wait, hold on. Did we do this? Yep. Adam Taggart had asked a question. Well, it says Adam T, but I'm assuming that's Adam Taggart because I know who Adam is. Hey, Adam, would you like to ask your question live?
Hey Tom, how's it going?
Hello. All right.
Fellow Brit, but actually living in the US, so it's interesting hearing about HMRC now that I'm way a ways. Sounds interesting what you're doing. Thanks for sharing your experience. My question's about the large processing comment that you made. You were talking about particularly large processing. I know you were talking about Slurm at the time and like job loading and stacking it that way. Could you give us an example of what large processing means for your team on the regular? So is that high input output? Is it high memory usage, or is it just massive raw data that you're trying to funnel into a process and get some meaningful output from?
In the main, the things we've seen so far are shaped like I need loads and loads of RAM and quite a lot of CPU on a single machine. is the kind of use case we've seen so far. So that's what brought about the Slurm-based use case, is people saying, actually, I want a machine with 0.5 terabyte of RAM and I want it for a week to do this piece of work. We don't, or at least not within our space, we don't have anything that works well at the moment for an ad hoc bulk processing type thing, and we may want to get something with that later. But yeah, large scale tends to be, if it's ad hoc, I want a single giant machine. There are other systems dotted around that do more batch type stuff, but the users of Posit tend to be consumers of the outputs of those systems rather than actually doing like a raw processing job on all of this type stuff. So yeah, that's roughly what big means. There is some stuff as well using multiple GPUs for a few different bits and pieces. So there's some GPU shaped stuff, there's some memory stuff. I haven't seen any requests for giant IO type stuff as yet. But yeah, it tends to be memory for the most part.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for that question, Adam. We have an anonymous one that you touched on a little bit earlier. You had mentioned that you are kicking the tires on some of the AI functionality. And this question says, in our team, we're considering AI for some sensible use cases. However, management are really nervous about it. Do you have any advice for handling this and providing reassurance? Have you had any experience with it yet, Tom?
Not personally. It's more with our users. So the way we've tended to do it is they will own the team who are users of Posit would own the requirement and the risk and all of that. Unfortunately, this is something that Darren is probably better placed to talk about.
Oh, Darren, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
We have a
It's a
we
bit
are missing you.
But so we have a lot of existing processes around things like data protection and anti-bias and all of these kind of they're all things you should be doing anyway, but it's a large organization and so they are very much formalized. Many of those things can be applied to the AI models. You need to be able to honestly answer the questions that people would have if they're going through something like a data protection assessment or because I imagine that your bosses, their worry is, if I'm standing in court because of a discrimination case because your AI has done something,
Right.
or a fraud thing, what do I say? Can you point me at something that says this was in a way that kind of would stand up, this was a reasonable thing to do? And I think that's where the fear comes from. And it is methodically and carefully taking it through the steps. So I suppose it's a similar thing to, could we use a new cloud provider? Can I put companies' documentation in Dropbox? And you'd have to go through the steps to make that reasonable. It's been fairly similar to that sort of approach.
It's similar and yet a little bit more scary for everybody because it's still this like unknown gray area. Megan had said in the chat, our IT department handles all of the AI stuff. There's people dedicated to analyzing the risk and the deployment of that. And we have a separate VPN that holds all the models and chatbots that we use. I think that that is a great, interesting perspective to share. If anybody else has perspectives on how their organizations handle AI in responsible ways or ways that make them feel safe, I would love to hear about it. I would love it if you could share. Okay, let's head back over to Slido. I saw a question in the Slido that was about hiring, and I didn't know, Tom, do you do any hiring? I know you're a tech lead.
Sorry.
Okay.
No,
all right.
I don't.
No worries.
Everything would be on the website, though.
Okay. Let's see. We had a question that was more about upgrading. There it is. Okay. How often do you get to upgrade your Posit environment to bring in new packages, features, etc.? I like this question because you had mentioned people requesting things like extensions in Positron. When someone wants to use a package or a new tool, do you have a process that they have to go through to get packages approved? And then also versions of R and Python?
So packages as in like CRAN packages and Python packages, I'm
Probably.
assuming probably. So we make those available via Package Manager, and then we have a facility where the individual teams are able to configure allow lists if they want to. So we would make
okay.
PyPy available with like standard scanning stuff like X-ray, filtering out anything that's like particularly malicious. But then we have a facility where teams can configure their own allow lists by providing a list of packages, and then they can have a filtered view of Package Manager. And some do that for safety reasons, and some do it just so they don't get a sprawl of slightly different implementations. When it comes to anything that would require an OS package, that we would roll it into our standard release cycle. So the way we do releases is we build everything into Docker images just as a convenient deployment artifact. In our development environment, we build several new versions per day, and that gets rolled out to dev maybe once to 3 times a day. Any change like adding a new package just goes through that process, and then we apply updated versions to each of our production tenancies on a, for the most part, monthly basis, but some of our more trailblazing people do every 2 weeks. We pull in new versions of Posit roughly a week after release for the most part. But for people who want to try things that are a bit newer, we also have an environment that runs the daily builds of Workbench, so that when we're chatting to our friends in the kind of account and tech team, if they're telling us about shiny new things, we can just open it and go, ugh, I don't like the shade of that. And we can so yeah, we have the daily builds available as a test environment for our users as well. And we have, it's all quite open. So our end users have access to our source code repositories. Some of them have made changes. And yeah, so it's not crazy fast, but we can roll a new version out probably within about a month of release to everybody.
I would love to ask a little bit about how you communicate those changes with people across the organization. Do you have a rolling newsletter that goes out by email? Do you have like a Teams channel where all of those updates are mentioned? Or do people kind of like get a pop-up on their computer system that's like, hello, you have a new version and this is what's different?
So we tell people via a Teams channel that updates are coming.
Okay.
And we have pre-arranged maintenance windows for each of the tenancies that align with what their priorities are. So there's an agreed, it's kind of the form, the third Thursday of the month type schedule. But also we have kind of particularly engaged people from the teams. So the more Trailblazer users or the senior, like kind of senior, not quite manager, but the more senior people, they come to our planning sessions and stand-up sessions. So people are aware of upcoming changes at the point where we're discussing what we're going to do, and they will have feedback at that point.
Before they come out.
Often yeah. So people will be talking to us about, things. You know, often requests or anything other than Posit updates, usually those changes and they have come from users directly logging Jira tickets, then coming to our planning and discussing where they should be in terms of priority, how broadly applicable those are, how soon they want them. that kind of thing.
Fantastic. Yeah, you have much more communication than I have experienced in a lot of places around what's happening and why, and getting sort of a roundup of feedback, which is, I think, amazing. I keep wondering, I wonder if Tom and Darren know how unique the HMRC is in this aspect, because it's just something I haven't seen in a lot of other places. Okay.
We do try and be very close to our users, and that's amazing. It's not just the formal things like planning. So we have Teams channels that are for questions and support, and partly those are team specific, and they are for both things like what our library would you recommend for this use case, and then people kind of self answer for what suits their team. We as the platform team sit in those channels and we'll see if people are having challenges with things. And quite often what we might do is just give them a call and watch someone struggle with however it is they're doing things. And then that might be, oh, we could use some help here, or we need to make a change to make it harder for this error to happen.
Right.
And actually seeing how people use it, we've learned a lot more about how the system should be, because we're approaching it from system administrator perspective rather than people who are doing data science things. And yeah, so we might spend 2 hours on a call with an analyst, talking to them about how they are using Python and the issues they're having, and what we make available that might make their lives easier.
Right.
And that feeds into.
Can you remind us the scale that we're talking about here, as far as a number of end users who might be in one of those channels asking for help?
I think we're getting close to 600 analysts.
Wow. That is a lot. And that's that blend of Python users and R users and all kinds of others. Okay, fantastic. I would love to head over to Slido. We have a couple more questions left, and we have about 10 minutes left together. So I have a couple of questions here. One will be a little bit more on the career advice end, so I'll save that until the end. That's Rachel's favorite question, the career advice question. We'd love to get that in. But I wanted to ask this anonymous one, which was, what was the change management process like from your experience, and how did you overcome organizational inertia when moving to Posit? Did you experience much pushback? Tom, were you at the organization when you actually adopted Posit first? You were not, right?
No, I wasn't there when it was adopted. I've heard anecdotally that formally the process wasn't. Our process for adopting new things it's slow, but it does kind of rumble through. Getting new things is not that difficult as long as they're solving a completely new problem.
Right. Yeah, we talked about that.
I think my understanding is Posit came on during COVID, when sort of emergency rules were a bit in effect.
Right.
But I don't know the details. I wasn't working at the organization at the time. But I think it got in under that sort of, we have an urgent problem to solve.
And we need to figure it out right now. Everybody in the world had that problem during the pandemic in so many different ways. I feel like that's why we're using Zoom right now, because all of a sudden everyone was like, oh, we now all need to work and not see each other. All right. Thank you so much, anonymous askers today.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I couldn't. Oh, actually.
Oh, go right ahead.
I could say for our more routine change, so not something big like, oh, we'd like to adopt Posit, but for our change process for how we update the platform, it was a empathy, pretty much. So I come at change management from a traditional I want to do things, well, from an I want to do things background, and what are all these people doing who have forms for me? And it took a chunk of time to build empathy and trust between both us and the change management people, that us understanding what their priorities are, what they're trying to do, and that actually their remit goes beyond protect the users, make sure there's not an outage. There's also the coordinating wider business events where something we don't know about might depend on our system, or something we depend on might be changing at the same time. Thinking about risks, making sure all of the impact assessments and all of this stuff is in a sensible place, and also just the bigger picture. And we spent a long time talking with the change management people, understanding and also helping them understand what we do, and that lots of the things that they are in a fairly paperwork state in their world, we're doing automatically, and showing them that actually we're ticking all the same boxes as you are, but we're doing it in a different way. How do we bring those together? And that was quite a long journey, but having gone through that, last time I went into the office, I got a hug from someone who was from the change team, having got all of this done. And it's about relationships and empathy, pretty much.
Yep, every single time. I love that that's the answer. Remember that the people you're working with are indeed human beings. Well, speaking of human beings, let's highlight some people from the chat here, because there was a question asked in Slido that I don't think is particularly a Tom question. I think this is much more of a community question. And sure enough, 3 different answers came in from the community, and I would love to read some of these. So the question was, sometimes it feels like only a few people on a team are stars who really move the needle. As a leader, how do you raise everyone's level so the whole team performs like your top players? What a good question. I'm going to read some of these answers that came in. And Tom, I will also ask you for input if you have any experience here. So one of them is, what I try to do is find the right task for the right person. If people enjoy what they're doing, they are more likely to perform at a high level. As an IC, this is the answer for me. Give me something that I enjoy doing, also something that's really in my wheelhouse and makes me feel comfortable and is in alignment with my values, and I'm going to do it much, much, at a much higher level than I would otherwise. Another one is, you can also try pairing up the high performer with someone who is just learning, and they can level up that way. What a great suggestion. I also think that the higher level person will learn from the new person, because that sort of like feedback loop definitely happens. And then another one is, the tasks we get come from stakeholders. I've tried pairing, but this really doesn't move the needle and it's not scalable. I know my team of 10 can all perform super well, but only 2 are really meeting customer needs and are praised. I think that this is more of a question than an answer, but I think it might be an interesting one to tackle if you have any feedback or advice on it, Tom.
Something we try and do is we try and do things, particularly when it comes to externally facing, so other stakeholders within the business, we try and act as a team doing these things, and we work in a way that all of us are comfortable with. And I don't really like to think of it in terms of people being high or low performers. There's a set of work that needs to happen. People have got some specialisms and preferences, but the team as a unit is trying to get things done. I feel there's a bit of a risk if you've got too much of the kind of the hero culture type thing, that can get you into a bad place, because it's a bit of a downer for people who aren't being specifically called out. It's good if it happens, but it feels like it shouldn't be especially routine. I particularly like it when we get praised as a team. So occasionally we've had feedback from people where they are calling out the team as an entity who are delivering what people need. there is, you can make sure people are doing the right work that suits them. But I'd also try and think in terms of, is the team structured and is it receiving work in the right way that allows everybody to the space to succeed, and also the space to be doing things that aren't a strong suit so that they can learn from that. If you're running at 100% capacity all the time, you're in trouble as soon as someone's, they're a bit under the weather, or they're worried about something. If you're at that kind of capacity, it's going to be bad, and maybe to push back a little bit on it, try and have a slower pace of deadlines or that kind of thing. But that also, building trust with the wider organization really helps with that. So when we don't get do it type requests, we get conversations about what's possible, how it might be doable. And we can start by having informal conversations that are a bit, that's going to be easy, that's going to be hard. You can have that in a couple of weeks, and this will probably be 8 months. And we have these kind of conversations. Sometimes people go, actually, it's not worth that much effort. And you're having honest conversations with stakeholders, and it's not kind of work flowing downhill. It's a collaboration. And some of the collaboration is actually, sometimes it's going to take us a bit longer to do things. And it's a lot of trust building to get to that point. We've done a huge chunk of that just by doing this for a long time. But that's, I think it's trying to avoid the situation is probably the way I would approach that.
Well, I don't think I could have asked for a better piece of career advice there, because all of that is such a good idea, but so hard to actually implement, right? Like, stay at 85% capacity, allow yourself that buffer, build coalitions inside of your organization, build trust, work on things collaboratively. Everything is a good idea until someone has to implement it. And it takes a long time. So thank you so much for giving us all of your wisdom today. Darren, if you are there and can hear us still, we missed getting to talk to you. Hopefully we'll talk to you again soon. So sorry you had connection issues. Tom, I hope you had a good time today. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, that was fun. Thanks for having me.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing all of HMRC's wisdom with us. We're so glad that you joined us today, everybody. I hope that you join us on the 3rd with Satish at Johnson & Johnson. Sign up for that webinar. Come hang out with us then. And then next week, we're going to be joined by Samia Baig. I don't know how to say Samia's last name. I'm going to have to ask her. She's a senior data scientist and data engineer at Johnson & Johnson Innovative Medicine, and I'm really excited to talk to her. All right, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy your Friday Eve, and we will see you at the webinar on Tuesday. Bye, everybody.